So our first score for Batch K, our 11th video, which, is getting close to 60 scores. We went over 60 scores so far. And, this actually, I'm going to be evaluating these scores until the deadline tonight. It actually sort of feels like Oscars night or something, or a little bit like election night, which it actually is in the United States. Not to say anything political or anything, but it just feels like that kind of night where there is, sort of busy action and expectations. And I don't know, maybe nobody is watching this, or maybe interest in this is going to fall off right here at the end. And then we'll only get a few views for these last couple of videos, but it just still feels really great. I just feel like everything is bubbling and simmering along, and I'm just real excited about it. So I'm just going to keep evaluating these until the very deadline, and we're running out of time, and then that way all of the Facebook evaluations will be finished, and then I'll be on to the Patreon evaluations tomorrow, which are going to be a whole different ball of wax, as you'll see. Okay, so so rather whimsically renamed piece here, or arrangement here by James. Yeah, so I think James sort of was, like he says, reimagining the score. So I'm just going to completely judge on how it's scored, and really not worry too much about how much it replicates the or transcribes the original score. Now, I'm intrigued by the choice of instruments. I think that's really cool. Flute, oboe, clarinet, and bass clarinet, one of each. And it's kind of nice to have the bass clarinet instead of the bassoons. It'll give sort of a very tooty kind of low end, sort of very more hollow kind of low end. Now, the melody starts off here in clarinet and jumps over to oboe. Now, it's going to be hard to get P on a piano on a low C. It's really going to sound more mezzo forte, really. And so is the D flat, really. It just, you get more control from, I'd say, D or E up, right? Or maybe E flat. But like really getting down there, when you start getting to the extension keys, like concert D is the lowest non-extension note for an oboe. And that is really, kind of the limit at where you can really get a beautiful P sound. And then as you start getting lower and lower down into the bell of the instrument, the notes get honkier and honkier. I mean, not that this would be impossible, but it's just difficult. It's not an easy sound that you're asking. It's interesting how you have staccato alternating with tenuto. Now, the tenuto is not going to give you the same kind of sound that you might expect on a piano. It's going to be a very full note, and it's almost going to legato into the next note, right? It's not going to be like that sort of kind of sound of a piano. It's going to be like rather than dun dun, right? So if you were planning on sort of almost a tenuto staccato, that's not the sound that you will get there. And if you are intending on a tenuto staccato, it's almost better just to write the note with no articulation. Because, I've had horn players say, if you want a tenuto and you want a staccato, why don't you just write nothing? Why don't you write just no articulation? That's not to say that tenuto staccato is a normal note, but it just, they kind of get stuck between which is which sometimes. Okay, interesting, you have this nice little hanging upper pedal tone as the music goes on. And kind of cool that, there's just that nice, lovely fall of down an octave. It's kind of cool that it's like, it's you're going from a throat tone down into the Chalumeau register. So you're not actually crossing the bridge here. It's kind of fun. I just find that detail kind of really, really cool. So, the player, not that the player couldn't have done it from a B natural, but it's just is, kind of a easier thing and very convenient thing. Now, clarinet slowly rising here. Interesting the way that you have notated the slur and that you're keeping it consistent in both the cello, which is getting like the lower voice of the harmonization, and the clarinet, which is getting the upper voice. I think that's wise. And this is also neat, the way the violin starts to take off. And you're not going da 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 ba da ba da ba bum. You're going da 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 ba ba da 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 ba 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 da 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 da. It's and so on. It's just kind of like a chain. It's going, kind of doing the backwards kind of thing. And yeah, it's not too different. Aside from the fact that you've re-envisioned the melody a bit, it's really not all that different in terms of the strategy here, of the accompaniment and the in all the instruments, I'd say. Very neat the way you're adding this little flavor of bass clarinet, sort of filling in this hole right in here. That's really cool. And then these long tones. Yeah, very, very cool. And then this little sweep up here to the next thing, which is really, I feel that here the arrangement starts to not really fall apart, but it feels like it needs to be filled in, that you probably had bigger plans for this right here. And, I would have been happy with just this right up to there. You could have stopped right here. Partial entries are fine with this challenge. It's not a contest, it's a challenge. And yeah, I mean, just really fun. I almost expected, like the way that this was being scored, that you would start doing something more contrapuntal, right? Than just sort of typical playing over the fifths, just sort of more rhythmic harmonic strategies. But you would like maybe take it in a more contrapuntal direction, since you're kind of starting low and then starting to stack and so on. Okay, and then we kind of just go to the same place that we were before, but all strings. And then you sort of end with a couple of sforzando chords. So, yeah, look, I mean, I'm intrigued, James, and I would really like to see you get involved with the next challenge. Everybody's asking me when that is. I think maybe in about 3 months, maybe 3 or 4 months, all right? And I have a couple of really, really cool things chosen for that. And, one I think that will really surprise people and excite them. And the other one, which will be a little bit more general. So I'm sort of balancing between the two and seeing, what would be better. So anyway, nice little snippet, okay? And you don't have to say quelque chose. I mean, it's fine. It's just a little sketch of an arrangement. Great job. So on to the second score of Batch K. All right, we have another partial entry by another James. And this is also really cool, too. I mean, it gives me a chance to really hone in on some particular details and maybe give a little bit of advice about scoring and everything else. Now, I'm assuming that this little bit of piano is just for reference, that it was just like kind of scored out, and then you're not actually going to rely on an actual piano there, right? And I would say in general, unless the piano is used very decoratively and in the background and just occasional, one shouldn't really add a piano to the score of a work that is a piano transcription, right? Just you want to sort of not overdo it. You want to get away from as much pianistic sounding tone as possible. Now, apologies if you are hearing a little bit of a kind of a grinding noise in the background. I am living a couple doors away from a place that is a house that is about to fall off of its foundation. 3 houses away. And it's really funny. It's like about maybe 3 stories up from the street, and then there was another maybe 12 feet of very loose brick. And they tried to sell this house, and it wouldn't sell. And I think it was sort of pointed out to them that the house was about to sort of fall off the hill into the next house. And actually, during trick or treating last week, I walked by it on my way to yet another house. And yeah, it just really looked pretty dodgy. So they have been pumping concrete into it and shoring it up and doing all this kind of stuff to it. So, yeah, which will make my neighbors feel a lot safer. So, but anyways, if you hear a grinding noise, it's probably somebody pumping concrete or somebody maybe clearing brush around the area where they need to get in and build. So, sorry about that. Okay, now on to this score. Now, here I feel this is kind of overkill, right? You have a beautiful idea here, right? This idea of either the beautiful flute in its middle register here, this lovely sort of it's right in this area for the flute. It's just as beautiful and clear and it's like a like a wonderful young person singing with a beautiful, clear voice. That's really what the flute reminds me of. Like a, just something. There's something just very pure and wonderful and poetic about it. Now, the oboe, on the other hand, this is not really its middle register. It's sort of like getting towards its middle upper register. And it's more of like kind of a sweet, innocent sound of a different kind, just a very kind of loving and indulgent sound. So look, you're putting both of them together, right? And, I would say either or. When you put them together like this, it's sort of, it lessens the impact of either of them individually. Okay, now here you marked these hairpins, which is great. Fantastic. Good on you, James. And then you've marked sim. You can't mark a sim on this, right? Unless it was a situation where you had like a little swell in the middle of a bar that went on for like 30 bars, right? If you had a very repetitive section that had kind of the same dynamic approach for, dozens of bars, then yeah, sure, you could write sim, but don't do that. Write them in all the time unless it is just a very, very repetitive piece, unless you're writing something that is minimalistic. And this all pretty much works. Yeah. It's a bit far away in terms of harmonization of this line, but not too bad. And then you have the English horn come in, which is cool. Now, so right here, there seems to be a bit of confusion about what A2 means, right? So like, if you have one staff apiece for each flute, you don't need to mark A2 or 1, right? Unless these are sections of flutes, right? If this were like 8 flute players sitting in a row or 4 flute players on one staff, almost like a section similar to strings. Like that happens in bands sometimes. You'll have your flutes and your clarinets in a group. They'll be playing groups, and that's where you get divisi markings in wind parts, right? But yeah, this should, this is obviously flute 1 playing this and flute 2 playing that, right? So you don't mark A2, right? Unless, now if these were on separate staves, if this was all condensed to one staff, then you could just say 1 on this and then have every part just on one staff, which you could have done here, right? You could have made it much simpler. But it's okay. Don't mark A2 if there's only one person, if there's only one player on a staff. And the same thing here, you don't have to mark 1, right? And the same thing happens here, clarinets. Maybe this was condensed from other parts and then sort of expanded out or something, and it got a little confused there. But anyways, watch out for that. I like the changeover from 5 lines from 1 line to 5 lines. I think that's really, really cool. But you have to mark what this is, right? Percussion 2, what? What is it? Is that a suspended cymbal, perhaps? Ding ding on the triangle is pretty good. I think this is nice. And it's pretty heavy on the top line. You know what I mean? This is kind of nice though, pulling away and going, heading back down. That's nice. Some nice string scoring in here, and it's kind of cool the way that you have supported this. Okay, but I mean, look, it's a bit heavy in a way, to tell you the honest truth. You're basically doubling the clarinets and the bassoons all the way down the line, right? So it's exactly the same part in clarinets and bassoons. You could have lightened it up quite a bit by just having one or the other group play, right? Alrighty, moving on. Okay, so this is, yeah, once again, this is just a small thing. Yeah, I assume that is intended to be a suspended cymbal. And yeah, so yeah, horn is sort of kind of playing, it's sort of doubling the cellos an octave higher, and which are being doubled below by contrabasses. There's a bit of a stack there. It's kind of a bit of a stack there. Almost feel like this is more of a double bass, sorry, not a double bass, a bass clarinet at the pitch of the cellos kind of part. Anyways, that's what sort of occurred to me. Okay, now this is pretty heavy. Once again, we've got two flutes, or not once again, but now we've got two flutes on this, plus the piccolos an octave higher. So it's a bit heavy on the lower line. You don't really need to do that. See, this is more appropriate, I would say. To have them both be single, playing an octave apart, just gives you like a cleaner line. Unless you've got some kind of doubling with the strings as well, that sort of makes everything sound very sweet. Yeah, and this trading off, it probably it's kind of nice. I like this. See, this is what I like down in here. This is really fun. And then you go up to here and kind of do something similar as to what happened before. So, I mean, there's nothing really bad or anything about this. It's just, just kind of, try to go for the individual tone of the wind players a little bit more. Watch out for A2 and so on when you have got single parts on each staff anyway. And yeah, try not to just double everything, right? Here you've got bass clarinet and bassoon sort of playing the same thing. Now why do you want that? Do you want the color there, or I mean, why do we need to do that when we've already got cello on that, right? So just think about exactly, what is the consequence to that in terms of its sound and its balance and everything else. I mean, there is a kind of a cool weight to this, but it does really kind of come in at the end there and sort of makes the cool down heavier than the part that came before it. So just a thought there. So yeah, so I had a lot of fun looking at this. Very, very nice. And really enjoyed it, and would love to see you do maybe a little bit more on the next challenge in a few months. All right. Thanks so much, James. Our third score here is by Miriam, and I have to say I'm intrigued by a lot of this. I just really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of really common sense orchestration in here. A bit heavy on doublings at time, but it's still really cool. It hangs together nicely. It would be nice to see, say like a semi-pro orchestra take a crack at this, or a pro orchestra take a crack at some of these things after a bit of editing. Now, the first thing I would say is what you got to fix is the sense of phrasing in both the strings and the clarinet here and the melody, right? So, as you'll hear me say and sing, do you really want to just sound da da, right? Or do you want it to sound da da da, right? Slur slur slur, or note slur slur slur, right? Or slur 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 slur. You know what I mean? You got to work these things out, and you also have to think about the fact that the violins need, they are going to have less bow, less length to their bow than the wind players are going to have length of breath, right? So that you also have to think about that. Now, maybe you're thinking about that already by just putting this, making this shorter and this longer. But still, this is an awful. I mean, see, the thing is that you give up the ability to meaningfully inflect the phrase just by where the slur starts, right? You can give a sense of motion and meaning to a line by, having the tonguing start at a certain place, right? It can affect the pace and the mood and the psychology of the piece. And also, once again, I keep on harping on this, but, look, lines like this need nuances, right? They need diminuendo and crescendo. They need shape to them, right? more than just waiting 6 bars and then throwing in a crescendo to the next thing, right? So, we want to express something almost songfully, right? Okay, and moving on here. This is kind of nice, the divided. I mean, this is actually good because this is a nice big staff size, and it's really easy to, for me to read with my failing eyesight, and for it to be read as people are following along. Okay, yeah, so we sort of keep the same strategy here, clarinet and violin doubling, and it's pretty solid throughout. A couple things I worry about, though, is whether or not the double bass, just holding this note alongside the bassoon, is sort of just making things kind of heavy and sort of a little stodgy, just kind of really sort of holding on. And I also worry about P doing a crescendo to mezzo piano, which is like almost a nothing, it's mezzo piano is kind of a dull place to be for your strings. It's better for them to increase from P to mezzo forte. Do you know what I mean? That is an actual journey dynamically and expressively, right? Or you can like leave that off. You like don't even have to say where they're going, but just say that they're getting more, like just put the hairpin there and then come back out, right? You don't always have to mark exactly where things are unless a new instrument comes in. It's good that you've marked down the horn here. That's exactly what it needs to be. Okay, and this is rather nice. If you are holding on to this strategy, it's pretty good. Okay, and then you jump up the octave, keeping it in the strings. There isn't going to be a huge difference here, except that it's going to feel lighter. See, because like the lower strings are doing something very similar as to what happened before, except that the cello isn't playing pizzicato here, right? It's just playing more slurs. And then you just have the two violins talking to each other. No viola in there for some reason. Okay, but it's still going to feel very similar because there's, because it's not too different from this in terms of like having strings, a string play the melody, and it's going to feel a little bit more airy. That's kind of nice, and I like the jump down to pianissimo. Okay, and this is all very cool. Just nice little string thing, and then the little touch of bassoon coming in, I think is great, and I think it's really good that you did not double this with cello. Okay, I like that a lot. But this comes in pretty abruptly, right? Like, there's almost no motion really going on here. It's just sort of like very slurred, very smooth motion, and all of a sudden you're going boop, 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 right? So I feel like something about the pacing here is not really keeping up its tempo, right? It's not, and there would have been a perfect opportunity here for the violas to do something maybe in pizzicato leading into this, all right? Anyway, think about that. Moving on, this is pretty good. This is really similar to what I did, actually. I like that a lot. Flute, and then answered by clarinet, doubled by violin again, though. But, what do we need to do that for? We already did that. Right? So maybe one or the other, right? Or maybe solo violin or solo clarinet. You do not want to do exposed clarinets a two. Now, clarinets a two, when they're doubling violins and they are in the background, is fine. But a two exposed a two clarinets have a very phased sound, right? Go listen to the opening of the Fifth Symphony of Tchaikovsky. Okay, that's what I mean by a phased sound. Okay, and this is nice, going up to here, and then oboe taking over. I like that a lot. This is kind of strange. Ta-ta, ta-ta. Why not ta-ta, 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 or ta-ta, 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 ta. You know what I mean? There's different ways to do this. Just, yeah, this is perfectly fine, I guess, but, yeah, I just feel... Is there something more we could say there to sort of bring more rhythm into the melody? See, like here, you're going ta-ta, ta-ta, ta-ta. Or, sorry, ta-ta, ta-ta, ta-ta. Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then this is nice, and I like the fact that you didn't do a sweep up from the flutes too low into this high E flat. Okay, that was very cool. But this could have been harmonized, don't you think? All right. Nice, though. Yeah, so, here we're getting into places where I just think the scoring is pretty strong. This is really nice. I like the oboe and the flutes at an octave apart. You could support the oboe with something down here. You could even do like divisi octaves in the first violin so that you could just get a stronger, more consistent string sound throughout if you wanted. Okay, and once again, this could have been harmonized going up, right? Because you got both string groups, right? Or both violin groups going up there. Okay, now we get to the appassionata. It's almost like this is sort of this is a test, right? This is like, it's almost like check that box, right? So here you've got flute and oboe continuing their kind of octave melody thing, with the clarinet doubling the oboe. Doesn't need to, but it's still there. Okay, now look at this. Just one single violin line here for the octave, right? So this is going to be a very high, not screechy melody, but just a very high piercing melody without sort of stretching across the section, right? See, if the horn had you've gone flute, oboe takes the next octave, clarinet takes the octave below that, not at pitch with the oboe, or the horn plays an octave lower, right? Then you have your triple octave melody, right? Because, look at how much love you're giving to the counter melody, right? You got an octave here, then you got the English horn an octave below that, right? And then you've got the second violin on the top octave and the viola doubling the English horn. And then you've got the clarinet in the middle, right? And the bassoon with the English horn and so on. I mean, so it's like the counter melody is getting a lot more attention than the actual melody. And then nice fat octaves here below with the lower instruments on the bass line. That's nice. And this is cool. Exactly what you need to do, I think. My vision of this piece. Cool down. So by the time you get to the definite cool down, you really are dropping off to something softer, right? Okay, and this is nice. That is fun. And then the call and response with the two, with the lower strong version and the higher soft version. I like that. It's all really decent. Now, here's where we get into some stuff. Now, the question is whether or not you want answering succeeding colors. And if that's what you wanted, that's what you're going to get. However, you have to be aware that these alternations of colors are not going to smoothly dovetail into one another as if just you have this one line that sort of changed character as it went down, right? So you're going to hear the sort of tooting sound of the clarinet going into the very warm nasal sound of the English horn, going into the more pale sound of the bassoon above G, right? And then going into the horn sound, which this is actually not too far different of a timbre, right? So, I mean, if you give each one like one dovetailing note, then you get more of a mix. But still, if you wanted this to sort of mix all the way down and sort of be like that little magic trick of really turning from one into the other, oboe would have been a better bet than clarinet. But you've already used the oboe as your little answering sound here. So anyway, and of course, bassoon, scherzando, that's nice. Yeah, so yeah, and I like the fact that you didn't go stratospheric here. You sort of had to drop down an octave in order to get things a little lower. Now, there is a way around this, which I will show everybody in the final lesson for this, which is going to be my score. Okay, and there's a way of kind of tricking the ear into thinking that things are getting higher and higher when they actually are not. Okay, so yeah, I really like this a lot. It just, I'm really enjoying these last few scores. So great job, Miriam. It's very, very neat, and would love to see you participate in the next challenge. So yeah, great getting to know your work, and on to the next score. Okay, so our fourth score in this batch of challenge entries is Jack's score, and I have to say there is a lot of really good stuff in this, Jack. I'm just going to make one overall observation before we run through the score, and that is that I just really felt it was a flute-centric piece. There just was flute carrying the melody everywhere. And, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that there's so many other instruments that could have weighed in and taken over on a melody or two, a stretch of melody or two. And I just feel that there weren't any opportunities for them. And also when you got to the appassionato, there could have been more, more parts strewn across more instruments. It wasn't a very big tutti, right? So anyways, we will talk all about that as we go, but I just wanted to point that out before we get going. Now, you start off here, and this is nicely done. I like the fact that you have worked out some kind of bowing idea here. And you've got, you say molto vibrato. I almost feel like you could just say espressivo, right? And just, really bring that out. It's a little weird that there's no second violin marked. You know what I mean? It's just four instruments, 4 instrumental groups. And, I just feel you could really use that second violin in there. There's a lot that you could do with it. Okay, but anyways, it all pretty much hangs together, and this is a good pulse with the pizzicato in the bass. Very nice. And this, I thought, was really fun. Tuba being used as the bass for the horns. And, so many people make the mistake of like throwing in a bass trombone under exposed horns and so on. The proper instrument, I believe, to support horns is a bass tuba. And, I've actually scored a piece for Wagner Tuba Quartet and bass tuba. And Wagner tubas are essentially just really big, powerful French horns. So that makes perfect sense. And, I do think that I'm going to rescore the brass for my harp concerto to be probably tenor tuba plus horns rather than the bass trombone and horns that I had before, just because, just to make the tuba part a little bit more discreet and a little bit more along the line of the same sound as the horns. Anyways, I like the way that this is put together. I think it's really fun and it's really cool. I almost feel that there's a danger that the tuba is going to weigh down things because it's not really bouncing along the same way as the double bass, or that you almost need either or here on the cellos. But I mean, it could still provide a tiny bit of a low counterpoint, but it's just, boy, the tuba player would have to be as delicate can be, almost playing like a very soft horn in the background themselves, right? And I like these little toot-toots. Those are really neat. And that just works right into bringing in the pizzicato up to the next level with the cellos. And that is very cool. And I like this arco-pizzicato trade-off with the bassoons hitting, just hitting the 1s and the 5s. That's really, really nice. Now here we get into 2 flutes, right? And this works fine because the accompaniment is so delicate. So congratulations. This is a great use of low flute. Usually I have to scold my orchestrators about using low flute in a place where there is not a lot of, there is just, basically not much that can be heard. But this will be heard fine. Very nicely. Okay. Now here, the part starts to rise, and you bring in an oboe, and I think that's pretty neat. But the oboe makes a better, more radiant partner to the flutes when it climbs up a little higher. Like from C flat, it's fine, but as it starts to climb down lower and lower, it becomes less and less of an ideal partner, I feel. I think this is better off as a clarinet line, frankly, because the clarinetist can really control the softness of this in a way that the oboist can't, and really match the feeling of like making it sound like a second or third flute. Okay, I think that might be what you're looking for there a little bit better. And this all continues to work very nicely, and I like this this right here. This I don't know if I would slur this. This is possible, but maybe slur from this note to this note, and then slur these 3 notes. is kind of better, or down bow and then up bow over these 4 notes. I think would work out better. Now once again, now here we stick with flute. Now you could have actually stuck piccolo in here, like sort of have a lighter, kind of more fluttery tone, right? And it would be in that area of weakness that's so intriguing for the piccolo, right? Just so long as you got down to this G flat here and then didn't go any farther down, because once you get to the D natural here, then you are basically that as low as you can go, and when you get to the D flat, you're cooked, right? So anyways, I just feel piccolo would be stronger here. This is kind of neat, the clarinet coming in, and these little toot toots. That's kind of nice, and I like the simplicity here. It's very cool, and this is interesting. Da 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 da. In general, the slurring is very, very nice. Dun da 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 da. I like that. And horns, nice. I would almost mark this pianissimo here, really. Here you've got the cor anglais and octaves with the flute. And so, like, this is where I just think the flute stuff is getting to be too much. Really, there needs to be a change here of timbre. So if this were, like, say, by the time you got here, that this were the cor anglais and the oboe in octaves, that would actually work a lot better and just would be easier for everybody to play in here. I like the fact that this is not, that this isn't uniform, right? You are going 8th notes here and 16ths here. That's really nice. And then look, this is just the same thing as back here, isn't it? Right? We're kind of back where we were, and we're still sticking with that flute. Now, of course, you are doubling with the first violin, and here, like, I'm feeling the absence so much of the second violins. They could be playing an octave below the first violin, right? And they'd be much more agile than the violas, especially going to higher places. And this is kind of fun, this sort of tuba horn thing. Okay, now here, don't mark solo. Okay, this isn't a solo, right? If you say solo, the horn player will think, oh, I'm supposed to go boop, boop, boop. I'm supposed to come out. My part's supposed to be heard. Just write 1, just like you did here. Like, just allocate that you just want one person. But, if you mark solo, that means that the conductor is going to instruct the player to balance outwards from the texture, right? And this is marked P, and that's marked forte and mezzo forte, which is a little fussy, by the way. You could just mark everybody, you could mark everybody forte or mezzo forte, and then just bring down the brass to, like, piano or mezzo piano. Okay, now finally we get to the appassionato, right? And here we've got piccolo and flute in octaves, which is basically doing the same thing as the viola and the first violin. And there's just like almost no middle voice happening in here. It feels like it just is sort of incomplete, right? You could have had, what if you had like clarinet playing an octave below this, so you have 3 octaves of winds. Then you had second violins playing an octave below, playing what the viola is playing now, and then the viola is playing an octave lower than that. So you have 3 octaves, winds and strings doubling each other, and then cor anglais and oboes, right? Or maybe oboe, cor anglais, and second clarinet playing the counter melody, right? And then bass clarinet and bassoon on the bass line, right? Along with the tuba. And then the horn also sort of supporting in the middle on the counter melody, right? So there just is more that could have been done here, right? And then like, cellos could be playing octaves along with the horns and the bass clarinet, right? So there's a lot more that you could have done right in here. And also, this is very strange mixing. Why is the oboe up on a high E flat at mezzo forte? Everybody should be fortissimo here, right? Except for maybe the horns and the tuba could be like just forte. Okay. Right, and then here comes the flute again, right? So I think at this point, everybody in the wind section is going to be so jealous of the flute player. If they say one thing like, oh, you poor guys, they're going to, they're going to get a bocal cracked over their head. So, yeah. Yeah, doubling, I feel this is unnecessary. It just could have been just violin 1, right? And I like this. Cor anglais solo finally comes in, but it's doubling the bassoon. So this is going to be a very thick sound here. Yeah, it's not going to be the most relaxed sound as perhaps you were anticipating. Okay. And this is neat. Bass clarinet gets a solo. Always into that. And, answered by the violin solo. Okay, that is very cool. Okay, and then we've got our contrasts. Okay, but look, it is not P and P. It is mezzo forte answered by soft. It's like a soft echo, right? Dun 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 bum 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 dun. Right? So yeah, kind of missed a chance there, and it's also kind of using cor anglais again, right? Okay, and then trading off clarinet, cor anglais, and this is nice. 1 bar each of bassoon and bass clarinet, and rising artificial harmonics. This is all fun, and then you just end with the wind. So yeah, so I really enjoyed this score. I've been kind of picking it apart. One little thing is I don't think this is going to work. You're really asking them to all count as you do this hocketing thing, kind of moving through. Don't think that's going to work there. I think that is counting on the players. It's like boop, boop, bop, right? Just kind of moving around a bit. I think that's not going to work as good as you think it might. So anyway, alrighty. So yeah. So man, but I like this though. All the really cool ideas and the experiments that you're making. It's just very, very nice. So. Thanks so much for sharing this, and on to the last score of this batch. All right, our last score for batch K is orchestrated by Constantine, and yeah, I once again really enjoyed this score. This would actually not take a whole lot of tweaking to get ready for an orchestral performance. Just a few details here and there to cover. Like, for instance, here, this is obviously a support part, rather than really a part to speak out, right? And you've even marked it down one degree dynamically. So it's not a solo part, right? It might be a solo part when it gets to here. But this is not a solo, right? So don't mark solo 1. Just mark 1, and then here, if you really feel like it, you can mark solo, all right? Because this really is the featured voice, right? Now you don't need to mark. You could mark everything P, and this be P dolce. You don't have to mark the featured voice up unless you feel like the other strings are going to interfere. I really love the use of nuances. See, this is what I mean, folks. The use of dynamic nuances, and they should pretty much match in both parts, right? See, here you're hoping that this will play off of this into its own part, like this crescendoing and this diminuendoing. So, I mean, yeah, I guess. I just feel it's a little untidy. But anyway, I love this idea here. The pizzicato above, that's nice. And, the strings, all the rest of the strings turning into just nice harmonic support. The harp could have gone on. Yeah, and I like the bass providing some punctuation there, even though the cellos are slurred. It's all very nicely put together. And I love that little touch of bassoon coming in there. That's really nice, really. And this is fun, just a little touch of harp there. Now, here we go to the winds, and you've got A2 clarinets, and this just really feels unnecessary. It's too, you're going to have a nice harmony here with a single oboe. I'm assuming this is a single oboe on top. So you don't need doubled clarinets below it, right? You just need one clarinet. if you want a balance here. Two clarinets, you'll have this phased sound below, and sort of a single beautiful sound on top. So it doesn't make a good match here. But otherwise, the philosophy of it is good, but you don't need A2. This is nice. The solo first flute, and that is a solo, right? So that's a good use of the word solo, right? And then here, the oboe takes off and becomes not a support part anymore, but a duo with the flute. And you know what? This is not. And people are writing a lot of flute and oboe A2 parts, or unison parts, I should say. So a lot of flute and oboe unisons, and they don't sound as cool as you think that they do. You know what I mean? It's a kind of it's a sort of a peculiar penetrating sound. It's just doesn't have that sort of lovely beauty of expression that a single part has. Now, keep in mind too that when you have a single wind soloist, they get a lot more expression out of a line than when you have two people on the same line. Unless it's like a piece, unless it's a solo that everybody knows and is sort of listening to each other on, like the opening of the Schubert Unfinished Symphony. Actually, he had several unfinished symphony, but you know the one I mean, where there is clarinet and oboe playing unison, and everybody knows how that goes, and so they sort of listen to each other on the nuances. But here, I'm just not seeing. I think you should go with one or the other, frankly. Okay, and now here we've got flute coming in high with and it's funny, a lot of people are doing this. I think I did something similar too. I like the French horn on the little boop, 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 boop. So bassoon, boop, boop, bassoon, boop, boop. That's nice. And then, and the violas. So it's a nice division of labor here. It's all pretty solid scoring. Yeah. And here A2 on the flutes makes perfect sense. Now we're really kind of sticking with flute here once again, and not trading off on the player, even though you're getting lower and lower and louder and less audible, right? Flutes start to really seriously lose strength below G in the staff, and below A in the staff. So this idea, it's a good idea intellectually, but the flute needs, the first violins need a partner who is going to push more, right? So this is more of a clarinet doubling, right? So anyways, or you could possibly do oboes. Like if you're doing crescendo, then you're going to assume that the oboes are going to be stronger, right? So that's perfectly appropriate for the oboe to take over here, and it looks like they don't have anything else to do, right? Okay, but once again, we're just heading for, it's just flute, flute, flute everywhere, right? So it would have been kind of cool to trade this off to clarinet or trade it off to oboe, just to have a different color. And also just keep in mind that you are doing first violins playing everything too, right? So there are opportunities being missed here possibly to trade off between different timbres. Okay, and then see, we're right back where we were with this. It's exactly the same note and exactly the same harmonization. Slightly different accompaniment style in the lower strings. All right, and then we get to our appassionata. All right, so we've got doubled flute and oboe and piccolo an octave higher, sort of tracking these two. Our counter melody is clarinets playing octaves and just viola. You could have, the violas could have easily played an octave here, divisi, and then just doubled both notes of the bass clarinet. You could have also had these, had one of these horns just play a single note along with some of these, just like, okay, so this bottom note here, this bottom line here could have been first bassoon. This could have been second bassoon. And then you could have had the fourth or the first horn take over or double the second clarinet part here, just for more for a more vigorous push on that the counter melody. Likewise, you could have dropped the oboe part down an octave and had the second violins play octaves, right? And double, so oboes and second violins doubling each other in octaves. Okay, now this is nice. The oboe suddenly stands out with the flute twittering above it. Now this needs to be soft, right? This won't work. Like the clarinet is going to stick out too much, right? So everybody should shut up, right? And let the oboist play out. Of course, you've got this doubled. Well, this is actually a lot of strength on that line. Do you know what I mean? Do you really need 30 violins and an oboist playing this one line, right? So, I mean, just think about the balance there to the melody. So, this is great because it's an exposed Chalumeau register solo against soft strings. See, that's going to just balance itself. And yeah, so I like that. And then the bassoon comes in, says its little statement, and echoed by the oboe. And then we have the more emphatic call and response. Now, you know what? This call and response is kind of the same in both times, right? So maybe work for a variety of voices there. Okay, and then it's just violas to cellos going down for the very last thing. And this is all very fun. I'm glad that you just let the piccolo be the octave instrument above the strings instead of pushing them too high. That's really nice. Yeah, and then you just have this beautiful little chord with the tremolo at the end. So look, I mean, there's some really cool scoring in there. Don't get me wrong. I know I'm picking it apart, but that's why I'm here, right? And if your orchestration was perfect, you wouldn't need to do this, right? But this gives me a chance to work with you and to look at the orchestration of dozens of different people out there, and I'm really enjoying it. So I would say at this point, if you are checking into the Orchestration Online Facebook page, there are a few more hours to go. So if you're finishing up your entries, finish them up. And I will, I will look forward to evaluating them, and I'll try to get as many of them done as I can tonight. And hopefully all of them. Just basically finish out the Facebook evaluations, and and I just think it'll be really cool, very interesting for everybody. But I've got at least 5 more scores to look at. So anyhow, really enjoying this. Thanks everybody. And I will see you in the next video, which will come up in a few hours.